and welcome back to Davos. I'm Jack from TLDR News, and I'm joined by Jackowski, CSO of MasterCard. Very nice to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
Obviously, sustainability is an ongoing and important topic, especially for younger generations who are very engaged. What are the key opportunities that MasterCard has in order to progress when it comes to these kinds of climate issues?
Yeah, so we've spent a lot of time thinking about what's the right role for us, kind of where we sit in the center of the global economy. And really it's around inspiring, informing, and enabling more sustainable choices. So how can we help get people excited and motivated to want to live a more sustainable, fulfilling lifestyle? How can we help inform our merchants as well as the cardholders of what is a more sustainable choice? There's a lot of information out there and sometimes it's really hard to understand. So we have a product, for example, our MasterCard Carbon Calculator that helps demystify what a more sustainable choice may be, and then enable. How can we take the friction out of choosing low carbon solutions? And a great example of that, if you've been to New York or London or many cities around the world, you can now tap your MasterCard or your phone to get on the subway or the bus system.
Yes.
So you don't have to stand in line and get a Metro card or an Oyster card or whatever it may be. So making that choice of choosing public transit, for example, much easier, much less time consuming, and more available.
Enabling the conscious consumer is something that MasterCard talks about a lot. It was a title of a white paper you published last year on this topic. I'm interested, you've obviously mentioned a couple of examples there, but what other actions is MasterCard able to do when it comes to enabling and informing people about their purchases?
Well, so one of our big focuses for this year is technology that we have called MasterCard Move, and it's disbursement technology. It serves lots of purposes. It helps facilitate cross-border transactions, for example, but it can also help take that friction out of enabling a circular economy. And a good example there, there's a small town in Denmark called Aarhus, and we've got a pilot running using MasterCard Move where all of the cafes have all signed up to use reusable cups. So when you go into the cafe, you purchase your beverage, that includes maybe €1 or so for the reusable cup. You consume your beverage, and there are about 30 different kiosks all over the town where you then scan your cup, drop it into the kiosk when you're finished with your beverage, tap your MasterCard or your phone, and that payment is dispersed back to your account. So the idea is, you don't have to go back to where you bought it to return the cup, making it easier, frictionless, more available to be a part of the circular economy.
Interesting. And these kinds of approaches obviously work with consumers, but it's not just the kind of cardholders you're working with, it's obviously across the chain. So what action is being taken with your banking partners, with merchants, in order to make this happen as well?
Yeah, so I'll go back to the carbon calculator as an example of how we're working with some merchants. We've just been running a couple of pilots with different merchants around sharing more granular information about the carbon footprint of their products and services. And so we're running a bunch of tests of, if the merchant provides more granular data, does that help them sell more product or services? So again, we're encouraging our merchants to figure out, along with us, of how do we inspire, inform, and then enable more sustainable choices.
And how much buy-in are you seeing from kind of consumers and cardholders and also merchants? Because I think there's a broad understanding that obviously environmental issues are important, but people are also aware of other limitations on people's cash flow, on like the difficult business environment we work in. There's all kinds of different priorities. Are we seeing that this is something people are really invested in and really working to make happen, or is that something that's a challenge?
So I think in general, the market for these types of more sustainable products and services, it's certainly growing. But we also know it can't just be sustainable, it also has to be better. So how are we making, for example, what I was just talking about with reusable cups? It's making that choice so much easier, or with the transit opportunity of tap and ride the subway, right? You're saving time, you're dematerializing, you don't need the Metro card anymore. So it's a more sustainable choice, but it's also just better. Another good example of urban mobility, we have new technology. If you've ever tried bike sharing in a city somewhere, you download the app, you put in your information, your payment, and then you hope it works, and about 10 minutes later you're on the bike. So now with MasterCard technology, you can just tap your phone or your MasterCard on the back of the bike and get on in 5 seconds. So it's more sustainable, right? You're choosing to ride a bike versus maybe take a car, but then it's also better because it's faster, it's easier, and it's simpler.
Obviously, the climate discussion has become in some way politicized in recent years, and looking at the US and other countries, there's been some level of pushback towards these kinds of approaches and maybe instead focusing on purely kind of the economics incentives of companies. But I think there's an understanding among some companies, maybe including MasterCard, that investing in this is something that's important for the long run, that this is something worth investing in, and that consumers across the line really respect and engage with brands that do care about climate, and it is something that's important. So are these efforts around climate something we can expect to see continue from MasterCard? Are we going to see more engagement as time goes on?
So MasterCard is invested in the future of consumption, right? That's
Yes.
a key part of our business. And the future of consumption clearly is going to need to include more sustainable choices.
Yes.
We see that across each of the sectors that are innovating for themselves.
Yeah.
So we need to make sure for the longevity of our business that we are keeping pace and help leading the way. So the economy is changing, we recognize this, and of course we want to be a part of the future.
Amazing. It's very interesting to hear everything MasterCard is up to, and it sounds encouraging, the changes we have to come. So thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, Jack.